the higher education system, whether that is the private or the government. The participatory system and the government and market relationship, and the higher education system has to be led by professionals, highly qualified professors that have a reputation globally, not only nationally. The other important thing we have probably may be the curriculum, and then in the curriculum we have to look into curriculum that responds to the society, that responds to the market, that responds to the student. In the government sector, we just give programs because the government is responding or funding and whatever. But in the public, and I mean in the private ones, we cannot do that. The other issue in the global higher education sector is the brain drain. But today, I think you private sectors can benefit not only from that, but also the brain gain, the brain exchange, the brain circulation. A professor from the US, Europe, or whatever can share or can lecture, can teach, can research, can whatever, in any part of the world. So the system has to be that open, that attractive, and that flexible, so that the people all over, whether that is ours or whatever, can be used. The globalization is another very important challenge that we have today. And then probably the private ones might have some joint programs, branch campuses, and whatever. And so they can benefit out of those joint programs, be that research or whatever. Another challenge we have today is the academic career structure, and then the system, whether that is the private or others, should attract the best and the brightest researchers, teachers, innovators, creators, and what have you. For that to happen, a reward system or a system that weaves those who cannot fit into the system has to be in place. In all, the entrepreneurship idea, which has to be effective, efficient, or transparent, and has some evaluation system has to be in place. The other important thing we have is probably to the interest of time, the successful research universities. Which are successful research universities? From the invitation, I learned that research is to come as a priority, and then one of the important issues is the autonomy issues. It's not controlling, but rather steering, so that the staff will have the freedom to exercise freely, and the budget will be flexible, and the guidelines will have an autonomy that gives to the different levels of the system. The governance is an important issue. As you see, I'm in that area. And then the governance issue in the higher education system is important. So it should be linked with the respected and valued and reputable scientists, researchers, scholars, and it would be fine if they are elected, so that everybody will compete and they will get the vote of the thing. The other preparation we have as private sector, we should think of developing leaders, leadership development also, not only researchers, not only teachers, but researchers, the staff who would go in line, the leadership have to be again there. Basically, the funding is a challenge to the private sector. And then we have to do something, we have to influence the government, because it is a government issue, it is a national issue, it is a state issue, whether that is regional state or the government as whole, they should have different funds where we can have some operating finance. We should have capital funds. We should have student aid. The government shouldn't simply assist or aid or whatever support the public ones. Again, they have to look into the foundations. They have to look into corporate funding. They have to look into research networks and funding and attract international students. So the other dual programs may be there. And the higher education in all areas, as it has started in our case, has to be differentiated, and excellences or areas of focus have to come into our attention, and that happens usually when we go up the ladder from the paper I had this morning. Then you are moving towards the PhD, towards this research, and that has to focus. We don't have to touch everything. And the publish and perish syndrome will continue, and a higher education all over the world will be revealing itself or will present itself to the globe through its research. And competition will be through that, and then that will continue with us, though it is said as a syndrome. The internationalization in our curricula, in our culture, in our staffing, in our research, in our whatever thing is again another important issue. The academic profession is suffering from the profession, from the right professionals, including researchers, teachers, and leaders, and the private sector and the government, of course, have to work towards that. And then the professionalism, the academic profession, the higher education profession should be a profession which is noble, whose aim is to create knowledge, to challenge government, to influence policy, to direct the economy, and many other things. This, I think, we are going from the elite to the mass. Probably very soon we'll go to that. And then the contribution of the private sector, the private higher education sector, is moving the system from elite to mass. So because access is diversified, and we are going to that. Otherwise, the government alone cannot hold all that. Then whether it likes it or not, the government will allow the private sector to take its share, not only to take as an assignment, but to share resources, because whatever we produce are our products or whatever. So the government has to take its share in the budget and other things. Very importantly, the contribution that the private sector has, the brain exchange idea can be done. We have many scholars, professors all over the world, and then we can attract them. They want to contribute to their country, to their nation, because they haven't paid much, or they want to pay. And then the brain exchange, the brain circulation, or whatever thing, is an area that the private sector can work on. The landscape, only few can attend higher education, is changing. The idea, very few can join higher education, or very few can learn or can succeed, is already changed. And then that also is addressed by the private sector largely, because the government takes its share, and then the rest will go to the private. The other important thing, we have to look into the competition. Competition is fierce, and then in all our programs, in our student selection, in staff selection, promotion, publication, research conferences, as I said, This morning I heard that you received many papers, out of which you selected competitive ones. So that is a practice, and then that should be, again, a better practice to that. The other, the public and private partnership has to come into the picture. The government, there are government institutions, and then the private ones, they have to work jointly because the resource is ours, a common process, and the result is, again, to all of us. So that has to come into the picture. The quality assurance mechanism has to be strictly observed and be independent. As we observe here in Ethiopia, the quality assurance system is more stringent to the private ones than it is to the public. But as far as we are talking about quality product, then the public ones have to be equally accountable. The policy and practice has to be there. What is our role as a private higher education will be the last issue to address. In here, we need to have need-based programs. The programs that respond to the market, that respond to learners, that respond to parents, that respond to the labor market have to be there. And we have to have partnership with the industry, with the private other companies, and we have to have multidisciplinary programs. We don't have to stick to things. And the research also has to focus on the needs and the resources, the culture, the tradition, and whatever that we have. Very important that we have to intervene and to go into is the incubation center. Knowledge is created in higher education institutions, but we don't incubate it. We have to have incubation centers, and then from that incubation centers, the market can buy, can take it, and then we can influence positively, and we can make some benefit out of that exercise. The other important thing that the private sector has to look into is, to me, the development programs, whether that is teaching, whether that is leadership. They have to develop their own system, their own staff, and whatever. They have to look into company-sponsored projects, and they have to work in teams in cross-boundary issues, so that we can have an influence on our graduates. Our research outputs can have some product, and we can have some technology that will impact the society. All right. Okay. So the other important thing we have is we have to look into discovering. We have to look into conserving knowledge. We have to interpret knowledge. We have to transmit knowledge. This is the teaching part. But also, we have to create opportunities. Today, we are creating opportunities to both men and women, young and old, and everybody is attending whatever classes and many more. So the technology has to be compatible. We have to adapt the technology, and the partnership issue is another important thing. Interestingly, towards the end, we have much traditional knowledge. Did we really tap that? We have much traditional knowledge. And our research should be directed towards looking into and benefiting itself and the society out of that traditional knowledge and heritage. We have much indigenous knowledge and the brain exchange there. We have to look into resource sharing, experience sharing, and multidisciplinary or team approach is important. In all the cases, publishing and dissemination, I was expecting your last proceeding, because we are now coming to the second, and then the first proceeding has to be here by now. All right, you might have not presented it here, but that is the way we disseminate, or we can access it in any form. What areas need further attention? From all these, I have touched here and there. What are the areas that we are to focus on as private institute that would benefit itself and the system and the nation? The other, the search or the research for knowledge. We have heritage, we have indigenous knowledge, we have cultural whatever things, and then the search for that and the research of that is another important thing. Very interestingly, we should have data. Today is a data era, and then we should have data in all what we have. Do we have data on our knowledge, on our tradition, on our culture, on our whatever? So the data is probably the next mining, the next petroleum, or the next energy, and then the private sector, because I know it is not yet done, so the private sector can go into the data system. So that is one. The other, the government sector is not responding much to the vocational, technical, and business fields as I could see. So the private sector, because it is need-based, it is flexible, and then those kinds of things should be addressed. The brightest and the best faculty have to be attracted into the system in order to sustain. The fair and transparent system would take us longer. The participatory and team research would take us again longer. Joint publication and dissemination again will take us longer, and career and leadership development will take us longer. Entrepreneurship will take us longer, because we have to stand by our own. And on top of all, we have to influence policy. How should the government lead the higher education sector? Be that the public and the government has to be an effect. So otherwise, if we don't impact the policy, if we don't influence the policy, we can't reach anywhere, and then we move as we were moving in the past. This said, how can we sustain? We have to sustain research and search. We have to sustain conferences, and we have to sustain publications. We have to sustain quality through quality system, leadership, and academia. And lastly, sustainability is an equity issue. Sustainability is a peace issue. Sustainability is a unified effort. Sustainability is a lifetime project. So we all, whether that is a private or a government or public, we have to work towards that. And this is just to give you a panoramic view of my reading and my experience. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Demo Almasu, an assistant professor of higher education policy and leadership with the focus on higher education governance and leadership, and an academic vice president of the Constituent University. Thank you for sharing all the information which is needed for this international conference. And now I invite from Ministry of Health, which is a short information, 5 minutes, Mr. Mohammed Zani, Medical Education Team Leader, Human Resource Development Director from the Ministry of Health. Please welcome to the podium. Please give him a warm welcome to the podium.
እሺ ያው እኔ መጀመሪያ ብዙ ለመናገር አስቤ አልመጣሁም ነበር። አሁን ደግሞ ዶክተር ደሞዝ ያቀረቡት ነገር አሁን የምናገረው ነገር ነው ያሳጣኝ ነው። ትንሽ ያው እንደዚህ አይነት ሰው በኋላ መናገር ብዙ እንትን አይደለም። ኢንቨስት ያው እኔ ራሴን ለማስተዋወቅ ነው የመጣሁት። ያው የኛ ጤና ሚኒስቴር እንደምታውቁት ካሉት እንግዲህ አንድ ሚኒስትር እና 3 ስቴት ሚኒስትሮች አሉ። 4 ናቸው። ከ4ቱ ሚኒስትሮች አንድ ብቻ ነው ወንድ። እና እዚያው ታዘብኩት ነገር ምንድነው ሚኒስትሮቹ መጥተው ቢያዩ ሪሰርች የወንዶች ብቻ ነው የሚል ቅሬታ ይኖራል እና ለወደፊቱ ያው እንዲታሰብበት ለማድረግ ነው። ሴቶችንም ኢንካሬጅ ማድረግ ያስፈልጋል። እንግዲህ half of the population እና ሴቶችና ህጻናት የጤናም ጉዳይ በብዛት ከሴቶች ጋር የተያያዘ ስለሆነ ሴት ሪሰርቸሮችም እንትን እንዲሉ ወደዚህ መድረክ እንዲመጡ እነሱንም ኢንካሬጅ ማድረግ ያስፈልጋል የሚለውን ከዛ ባሻገር ያው እንደ ጤና ሚኒስቴር ተቋማትን ትሬኒንግ በሚሰጥበት ጊዜ ሰፖርት እናደርጋለን። ካፓሲቲ ቢልዲንግ ላይ ብቻ ሳይሆን ሪሰርች ላይም መደገፍ የሚኒስቴር መስሪያ ቤቱ አንዱ ኃላፊነት ነው የሚሆነው። ምክንያቱም ሄልዝ ኬሩን ኢምፕሩቭ ለማድረግ አውትካሙን የተሻለ ለማድረግ በኤቪደንስ የተደገፈ መሆን ስለሚገባው ኤቪደንሶችን ደግሞ ጀነሬት ማድረግ የሚቻለው በሪሰርቾች እና የተለያዩ ጥናቶችን በማድረግ ነውና ጤና ሚኒስቴርም ይህንን የሪሰርች ኮንፈረንስ እና የሪሰርች አክቲቪቲዎችን ሰፖርት እንደሚያደርግ መናገር እፈልጋለሁ። እንደኛም ብዙ ምርምር የሚያስፈልጋቸው እና ኤቪደንስ የሚያስፈልጋቸው ስራዎች አሉ። ጤና ሚኒስቴር ብዙ አክቲቪቲዎችን ነው ብዙ ፕሮግራሞችን ነው ራን የሚያደርገው ነው። ኤቪደንስ ግን በሚፈለገው መልኩ ጀነሬት እየተደረገ አይደለም። ፖሊሲም ኢምፓክት ለማምጣት ኳሊቲ ኦፍ ሄልዝን ኢምፕሩቭ ለማድረግ እና ከዛም ባሻገር ለኢኮኖሚክ ግሮዝም ኤቪደንሶች ሪሰርቾች አስፈላጊ መሆናቸው ምንም ጥርጥር የለውም። በዛ ረገድ ብዙ ሪሰርች የሚያስፈልጋቸው ኤቪደንስ የሚያስፈልጋቸው ኤሪያዎች አሉ። ስፔሲፊካሊ እኛ የምሰራበትን ዳይሬክቶሬት ወስድ ራሱ ሁማን ሪሶርስ ዴቨሎፕመንት ዳይሬክቶሬት ነው። ከዛ የሜዲካል ኤጁኬሽን ቲም አለ። አንደርግራድ ሜዲሲን ትሬኒንግ ሰፖርት ያደርጋል። አንደርግራድ ብቻም አይደለም የስፔሻሊቲ ትሬኒንጎችንም እንደዚሁ በሬዚደንሲ ማቺንግ ፕሮግራም ሚኒስትሪው ከዩኒቨርሲቲዎች እና ከሚኒስትሪ ኦፍ ሳይንስ ኤንድ ሃየር ኤጁኬሽን እና ከስቴቶች ጋር በጋራ በመሆን እንሰራለን። ነገር ግን ያው ብዙ ኤቪደንሶች ያስፈልጉናል እና የሪሰርች ፕራዮሪቲ ኤሪያዎችም ስላሉ ሪሰርቸሮችን ኢንካሬጅ ማድረግ እንፈልጋለን። ከኛም ጋር በጋራ ብዙ የምንሰራቸው ስራዎች ስላሉ ወደኛም እንድትመጡና በጋራ እንትን እንድንል ያንንም ጥሪ ማስተላለፍ እፈልጋለሁ። ፐብሊክ ፓርትነር ፕራይቬት ሺፑን ማጠናከር ፕራይቬት ኢንስቲትዩሽንም ይሁን የፐብሊክ ኢንስቲትዩሽን የምናሰለጥናቸው ባለሙያዎች አልቲሜትሊ ኮሚኒቲውን ነው ሰርቭ የሚያደርጉትና ከፐብሊክም ይሁን ከፕራይቬት የሚሰለጥኑትን ባለሙያዎች ኮምፒተንት ሆነው ብቁ ሆነው እንዲወጡና ተመራማሪም እንዲሆኑ ኤቪደንስም ጀነሬት እንዲያደርጉ ኳሊቲው አድቫንስድ ኬር እንዲሰጡ ለማድረግ የጤና ሚኒስቴር ትኩረት ሰጥቶ እንደሚሰራ ማሳሰብ እፈልጋለሁ። በመጨረሻም ይህንን ሁለተኛው ኢንተርናሽናል የሪሰርች ኮንፈረንስ ያዘጋጁትን አዲስ አበባ ሜዲካል ቢዝነስ ኮሌጅ ከልብ ማመስገን እፈልጋለሁ። መልካም ቆይታ ይሁንልኝ። ቴንክ ዩ።
Okay, I would like to thank our speaker, Mr. Mohammed Amin. He is the Medical Education Team Leader and Human Resource Development Director from Ministry of Health. Now, our guests and participants, we are going to the oral presentation, and after a few 1 hour, we will go to the poster presentation. So, to the poster presentation. The first oral presenter from Dredao University, Mr. Mulugeta, he will provide a lecture on presentation on empirical investigation of debt overhang and debt crowding, auto hypothesis in Ethiopia, auto regressive distribution of lag modeling approach. Please come to the podium and present your presentation. Mr. Mulugeta, please warm welcome for our presenter, Mr. Mulugeta.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we have a question. So, I'm a PhD student at Columbia University, and I'm working at the university. I would like to thank the Addis Ababa Medical and Business College for giving me this chance to present my paper on the empirical investigation of debt overhang and debt growing out in Ethiopia, which is an empirical evidence based on autonomous distributed lag modeling approach. So to start with, simply debt can be defined as an amount of money owed might by just individuals, firms, or government. Debt service just also can be defined as a payment of interest plus this principal as a debt is just due. And the debt service ratio can also be defined as a percentage of annual export earning that is needed to service countries' external debts. So basically, developing countries engaged in external debt most likely to improve their economic growth, mainly through capital formation and just increasing output. So if you look at the neoclassical growth model, debt in transitional economics or growth is very important where marginal output or capital is greater than the global interest rate. In this case, there is an incentive to get lower. That means when the marginal productivity of capital is relatively better, for incentive for those countries to get lower. However, after reaching a certain level of threshold, the effect of additional debt on economic growth might be negative since capital in underdeveloped economies is limited. Thus, nations see an encouragement to sign for foreign loans meant for investment in such much that return for funds is very low. So debt overhang actually can be defined as a potential of repayment of outstanding debt facilities well lower than the signed values. In theory, debt overhang hypothesis asserts that public debt servicing depress economic growth via a multiplier accelerators through first it deprives up domestic interest rate by increasing the cost of borrowing, which then crowds out private sector investment. It causes net flows outwards of domestic resources that comprise maybe just external grants, aid, and foreign exchange resource forms of public debt repayment. It presents future tax uncertainties and deterioration in domestic policies with direct impact on real returns on investment. It increases government's participation in domestic capital and money markets, which can then lead to credit rationing, and increases government's appetite to borrow to service debt, among other reasons. If you look at this, the figure provided in the time period that I consider in my study, if you look at this Ethiopian government, what makes them more or less similar is they even borrow from a single government. So they are just similar in borrowing, okay? Moreover, the crowding out effect usually occurs due to excessive real interest rate charges. While the terms of trade of an overly indebted country become worsened, while foreign credit market may no longer be available, simultaneously reducing its capability of maintaining its debt resulting from the crowding out effect, and therefore it strives to meet some of the obligations that by leaving little capital for this domestic investment. The crowding out effect actually assumes that governments debt expand a greater part of the national savings that means for investment due to increasing demand for saving while supply remains constant and the cost of living therefore increases. So the adverse effect of foreign borrowing on economic growth can be observed through debt stock and flow of service payment facilities that may probably throw up the investment. Moreover, it is deduced that debt causes liquidity restraints, which is resultant effect of decline in government expenditure due to the continuous servicing of outstanding debt stocks in excess of what the economy can contain. Both the debt overhang and debt rolling out affect actually the most developing sub-Saharan African countries. For instance, the staggering rise in external liability slows economic growth, while the increasing debt service burden lead to cut in public spending on some development actions in the health service. Therefore, previously, bolder approach was needed to arrest excessive debt that has detrimental impact on the growth of most sub-Saharan African countries, which provide debt relief with the goal of reducing all public and publicly guaranteed debt to sustainable levels and ensuring permanent exit from repeated debt rescheduling. As you know, እንግዲህ ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ በብዛት even external debt እንግዲህ ቲዮሪው ላይ ብለው ምንድነው marginal productivity of capital developing countries ላይ የተሻለ ነው ስለሆነ ቢበደሩ አድቫንቴጅ አለው ማለት ነው ሐሳቡ ግን just in most developing country including ኢትዮጵያ እየተደረገ ያለው ምንድነው they are just even getting loans to pay previously borrowed fund ስለዚህ እዳን ለመክፈል ነው ማለት ነው ወደ external debt አይነት እንትን እየተገባ ያለው ማለት ነው that is the basic challenge. If you are going to look at the empirical scenarios, we do have inconclusive evidence. Some just says empirically external debt has a positive impact, and others can say there is impacts of just external debt. So why this study is needed? Despite inconclusive evidence on the effect of external debt on economic growth, empirical studies that investigated debt crowding out and debt overhang hypothesis in Ethiopia are very scant, even though debt problem is a burning issue in the country. Moreover, some empirical studies done so far elsewhere lacks to properly measure this debt overhang and debt crowding out. It needs to be measured as debt overhang needs to be measured as external debt stock as a percentage of GDP, and debt service payment. Debt crowding out should be measured as debt service payment as a percentage of just exports, which otherwise would be just misleading. Therefore, this paper tries to fill this gap by answering the following basic research questions. Do really debt crowding out and debt overhang hypothesis holds for Ethiopia? If yes, what are the long run and short run effects of debt crowding out and debt overhang hypothesis? So before I am directly going to the methodological aspect, I need to show you by taking a simple data between 2009 and 2019. If you look at 2018, public debt totally reaches 61% of just GDP. Okay, which if you look at debt per capita, which is almost around $449, which means around $449 just per year per individual. That means which is almost around 20,000. ስለዚህ መንግስት በእያንዳንዱ ግለሰብ እስከ 20,000 ብር በአመት ይበደራል ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ we need to ask how many of us can እንግዲህ ኢትዮጵያ ህዝብ ምን ያህሉ 20,000 saving net saving ይኖራል በአመት የሚለው equation again. So it is very pressing problem. Having saying this, let's go to the methodology part. In specifying just this model, I followed the theoretical framework by Dean et al. That is some sort of variant of the solo growth model. This is the first empirical model. The Airedale bound states approach was used, and the error correction model is specified in order to look at the short-run just dynamics like this. If you look at the variables, the following are the list of variables included for the empirical model, and here is the measurement, expected sign, and the source of data in the summary form. Due to time, when I go to the result and discussion part, The first thing in doing time series analysis is to check for the unit root problems. So the augmented decoupleur test was used, and variables are found to be of mixed order, that is integrated of order 0 and 1. So here there is a possibility to employ the Arridale model. Again, in order to check the existence of co-integration, the F test on joint significance of variables the AIC criteria is used in order to just determine the lag lengths, and in order to look at the co-integration of variables, the F test was used. And as you see, the null hypothesis is there is no long-run relationship exists between those variables. And if you look at the calculated value, it is around 31 point something. And if you look at the critical values, they are just less than the calculated value. That means we are going to reject the null hypothesis that there is no long-run relationship. That implies that there is a long-run relationship among variables. So after that, we just I try to estimate the both long-run and short-run models. So here are the results of the long run and short run model. As you see, in the long run, both of the external debt as a percentage of GDP and debt service payment as a percentage of export, which are used as a proxy for debt overhang and debt crowding out hypothesis, are not significant. However, they are both significant in the short run. And there are other control variables included in the model, but I will try to focus on the main variables of interest. So according to the empirical results, even though external debt stock as a percentage of GDP is not statistically significant in the long run Airedale model, the error correction model result indicates external debt service as a percentage of GDP has a negative and statistically significant impact on economic growth of Ethiopia in the short run, supporting the hypothesis in the debt crowding out hypothesis literature. Holding other things constant, increase in external debt service payment as a percentage of GDP by 1% decreases economic growth approximately by 0.015% in the short run, and it is statistically significant at 5% level of significance. Thus, okay. Thank you. So thus the option for boosting economic growth process is to decrease the stock of foreign debt, as it discourages the growth process significantly. Finding is actually consistent with the following literatures that justifies that external borrowing discourages investment or growth capital formation, and that is going to hamper economic growth. In the short run, similarly, debt servicing variable confirms the existence of just debt crowding out dilemma, as it affects the economic growth negatively and significantly. Holding other things constant, increase in debt service payment by 1% decreases economic growth approximately by 0.019% in the short run, and highly statistically significant at 1% level of significance. And also there are literatures indicated for consistency of just the findings. So it's justified because debt service payment leads to discourage the productivity of debtors through just the crowding out effect that actually crowds out just like exports and others. For the sake of time, I will just leave the other control variables. And again, if you look at the short run coefficient, that is the error correction term, it is around negative 0.94. It shows, and it is negative, showing that the deviation of GDP per capita growth from equilibrium values is corrected by 94% in the following year. And there are also other model diagnostic tests. Okay, and I will just jump them. So let's go to the summary. Let's 1 or 2 minutes. Okay. So the paper actually investigated the effects of external debt on the economic growth of Ethiopia over the period 1991 up to 2019. Okay, for empirical purpose, I used data from 1991 up to 2019, which is the time series data. The study validated the coexistence of both debt overhang and debt crowding out dilemmas in Ethiopia. Let's forward the way forwards. So based on just this finding, at first it is important to create a very stable political systems actually that is essential to formulate appropriate and effective external debt management systems, which might lead debt towards development goals. The second, strengthening policies and strategies focused on export diversification is necessary. It may be again ambitious, but governments of resource-dependent countries like Ethiopia should work on bargaining for debt service payment in terms of goods and service rather than hard currency, which leads to twins outcome by encouraging export. Moreover, working on domestic resource mobilization through domestic saving and investment is vital. Thank you very much. You're amazing.
Okay, thank you, Mulugeta, for your nice presentation. I think we should go for the tea break, or the health break, and then we'll come back to the first team with the moderator of Dr. Berkat Solomon from Ethiopia Civil Service University. Now it's time for the health break. Thank you. So in the health break, there is a poster presentation there. So you can take both of them. The poster presentation will be presented by poster in outside of this hall. Then you can attend the poster presentation and having health breaks. Thank you.
ሀይቤል እንደዚህ ቢሆን አይሻልም? ዩ ኢንቫይት ማድረግ ነው። ከዛ እሱ ስታርት ያደርግ የሚሰራችሁ ብናደረግ ዋና ዲስከሽን ብሎ ታይም ዲፋይን የሚያደርገው ስለሆነ ከዛ ሰዎች አንተ በኋላ ደግሞ ግን አሁን እሱ
አንዳንድ ሰው ስንት አንድ ሰው
በኋላ ካለቀ በኋላ ፊድባክ ከመስጠት አሁን ኮሬክት እያደረግን ይችላል። ትንሽ ሪዝሜ ካላቸው ሜቢ እሱ
info ነው የሚጠቀሙት ዋናው ሰላም እና እየጠበቀ ነው ሌላስ ዙሪያ ልናራገው ታገሰ የሚደውለት መገዛቱን ቸክ ልታደርግ እንግዲህ የነበረ ደውልለት መገዛቱ
Good morning once again. Just let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. Baraka Salamon. I am currently working in the Ethiopian Service University as a senior researcher. So I will be the moderator of the business research. So I call up Mr. Bulo Fayisa to present his paper on the economic impact of COVID-19 on privately owned business, a case study of in the Jinka town. So I hope Bulo is here, so he will come here. He is working in Jinka University in the Department of Economics. Mr. Bulo, you will have a maximum of 10 minutes to present your research. So I recommend you to focus on the major issues, basically key findings and recommendations. So the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, all of you, and Addis Ababa College of Medical and Business College to invite me to present my work today. And I would like to thank you everyone for coming. And my presentation title is The Economic Impact of COVID-19 on Privately Owned Business in Jinka Town, which is a survey study. And my name, as you can see from the slide, is Bullo Faisa. I'm working as lecturer in the Department of Economics in Jinka University, and currently I'm working as Dean of College of Business and Economics. So this is my presentation outline. Since I have limited time, let me rush over it, this part. As an introduction, we will let us see first the introduction of the outbreak of the COVID-19, which is categorized as the global pandemic by World Health Organization, shocked the world at the virus is spreading so fast. And hence, to combat this virus or the pandemic, the countries have been closing borders, restricting mobility, closing schools, bars and restaurants, museums, sport activity, transportation service, and establishing quarantines, putting money into social awareness programs, importing sanitation product, and supporting the needy are common all over the world. Many people left unemployed due to the pandemic. Many people are left unemployed. Governments are spending more money for healthcare expenditures. Global trade and tourism are freezing due to the pandemic. Saving and investment are decreased. People are suffering from food insecurity all over the world. According to Almayo Gada, a professor of economics at Addis Ababa University, on average, the COVID-19 economic impact in Ethiopia is estimated increase the number of poor peoples by about 28 million. And before the onset of or the beginning of COVID-19, the expected growth of economy by Ethiopian government was 9%. However, the government has revised this number into 6 after the outbreak of the pandemic. And the World Bank and the IMF estimated this at 6% and then revised to 3 and 3.5% respectively due to the outbreak of the pandemic. And about 1.5 million workers in the private sector is vulnerable because employers couldn't run their business during the partial and total lockdown period. And this pure COVID effect on the economy of Ethiopia by sector. The first graph shows the effect of the pandemic on GDP, and the second graph shows the effect of the pandemic on agricultural sector, industry, and the service sector. So I have classified this effect of COVID-19 on different sector in three scenarios. The first one is the best case scenario, and average scenario, and the worst case scenario. And in the worst case scenario, the GDP of Ethiopia will decrease by 70.1%, and it will decrease by 11.4% in the average or mild scenario, and it will decrease by 5.7 in the best case scenario, and the rest sector will also be likely affected by the virus by this figure. Here, the service sector, which contributes more to Ethiopian GDP as well as Ethiopian GDP growth, will hardly or has hardly affected by these viruses, which, for example, service contribute to GDP by 39%, and it contributes for about 46% to Ethiopian GDP growth, have hardly hit or affected by this virus. By saying this, the objective of this study is to examine the economic impact of COVID-19 on privately owned business, and the specific objective is to examine the impact of lockdown on the private business sector in Jinka Town, and to assess the source of income and poverty before and after the outbreak of the COVID-19, and lastly, to assess the role of government and forward the way to combat the effect of all to all stakeholders. The methodology is, since it is a survey study, we have used both primary and secondary data, and we targeted on privately owned firms like manufacturing sectors, service providing sectors, private school, college, and micro and small enterprises. And we have selected 193 business firms from total of 3,942 in Jinka Town. And the model specification looks like we have two binary dependent variables, which is revenue of the business before and after the COVID-19. We have R1 and R2, and we model them jointly as a function of certain explanatory variables that determine the revenue of the firms. And each pair of the dependent variables will have four potential outcomes, whether the revenue of the firms is above or below the poverty line before and after the outbreak of the COVID-19, and we used a bivariate probability regression model. A bivariate model implies that whether the probability that non-poor household or business firms are poor or not poor after and before the outbreak of the lockdown or after the outbreak of the virus. Then, by saying this, let me proceed to the result in this discussion, since we have no time. So, my discussion or my first graph shows the effect of the pandemic on the revenue of the firms order, as well as workload effect of COVID-19 on the private sectors. As you see from the curve, the green curve shows the revenue effect 61. Business firms report that they will the revenue of their business were reduced by 100%, and the 48 reported as it is reduced by 75%, and 50% like that one. And the impact of COVID-19 on business operation, we have asked the answer. Almost all business firms answer they have stopped their business because of reduced demand, as well as because of reduced orders, and also try to see the impact of COVID-19 on purchasing ability. And majority of the farmers report that they have been getting difficult to import input from the nearby town, and they also face the problem of accessing inputs from Jinka town and so forth. And the revenue and cost of enterprises before and after the COVID-19 summarized like this one. The minimum and the maximum, as well as the average, is calculated like this one. And the number shows the revenue as well as the cost of the enterprise are reduced after the outbreak of the COVID-19. And this has the impact of COVID-19 on selling ability of the business firms. They faced loss of customers because of, as a result of lockdown and the stay-at-home order by the officials and the government. They faced loss of customers, and they faced continuous reduction of their revenue. The major problem of the enterprises. What would be the government measure? Government, they need, or the enterprise need, government to subsidize their businesses and to reduce or reduce tariff from, for example, on imported inputs, and they want free tax as well as temporary tax breaks. These are the needs from the government. The business development plan, these are the priorities that whether they need different business development plan like legal advice, advice on export and logistic restriction, business advice on diversification of their products, or how to they conduct their business at the midst of the pandemic, or advice on how to prevent infection while maintaining their business operation are the business plan they are looking for. These are the econometrics result of the bivariate profit regression model. Here we have two dependent variable: revenue of the revenue before COVID-19, revenue after COVID-19. These are the exploratory variables, and most of the variables are significant at 5% level of significance. That means they have a significant effect on the revenue of the businesses. Okay, I have 1 minute, and let me conclude my presentation by giving a conclusion, the recommendation. The COVID-19 crisis had several impact on private business and micro and small enterprise in Jinkatown due to diminished demand and the restriction on workforce movements. And let me present the average cost and expenditure of enterprise has been 70,000 before the pandemic, and it is 11,000 after the pandemic, and the total expenditure and the cost of the 3,492 farmers, private and the micro small enterprise in Jinka town is reduced by about more than 80 million due to the outbreak of the pandemic. And by saying this, what would be the recommendation, or what would be the solution? The first one is health response. Early and proactive measures need to be implemented to contain the spread of the virus. Social distancing and appropriate personal protection equipment also needed, and the started awareness creation campaign must be strongly continued. And the other dimension will be the economic response. Government, local authority, and Jinka University shall provide advice to the private business and the micro and small enterprise on how to prevent infection while maintaining their businesses. And the local authority, especially revenue authority, Jinka branch, should give due attention regarding tax reduction and rent subsidies are my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. So I thank you, Mr. Bulo, for completing his presentation within the time specified. So what would be our next task would be, I hope we will continue the third paper. Sorry if I'm mistaken about your academic rank. Mr. Alamu Balcha, is he around? So I invite him to present his paper on taxation of e-commerce as emerging financial issues in Ethiopia, a quest for integrating rules for taxation of e-commerce to income tax law. So Mr. Adamu is his academic he is LLM graduate in commercial and investment law. Currently, he is a lecturer at Madda Walabu University. So let's invite him and present his. No. Sorry. So let me invite Dr. Abraham. He will present his paper on Kaizen housekeeping, implementation and productivity of manufacturing firms in Ethiopia, the mediating role of PDCA analysis and waste elimination. So Dr. Abraham, you will have a maximum of 10 minutes to present your research output. So, as I have said earlier, try to focus on the major issues. Now you can start.
Okay, thank you. It will be just an honor to be here in this second international conference organized by Addis Ababa Medical and Business College. So my name is Ababa, and I'm one of the senior staff in Absa University Department of Management. So the title of my presentation is actually Kaizen, Housekeeping, Implementation and Productivity of Manufacturing Firms in Ethiopia, who is the mediating role of Plan, Do, Check, Act, or error proofing and MUDA or waste elimination. So let's go to the justification of the research. Over the years, many methods of improving manufacturing operations efficiency and effectiveness have been developed, from the work and the motion stated by Adam Smith up to Kaizen continuous improvement in Japan. So in the 1980s, Japanese manufacturing organizations, in their quest for global competitiveness, demonstrated a greater commitment to the philosophy of continuous improvement. So they named this process as Kaizen. So Kaizen, which is supposed to be simple, low cost and technology and people focused, which primarily aimed at continuously enhancing the firm's productivity and the quality, can be considered as a major competitive resources in this era. So the manufacturing industry in Ethiopia started in 1920s with a simple processing technology that actually produces agricultural-based products. However, the sector is neither transformed itself into high-tech processing as that of developed countries. It is nor competitive in international market. However, the country places abundant resources each year in the manufacturing sector to realize the national vision of becoming lower middle income country by 2025. So this can be achieved as indicated in GTP2 through developing the domestic engineering and manufacturing capacity, improving productivity and quality and competitiveness of domestic manufacturing industries at international level. So to solve the problems of productivity and to improve the competitiveness of manufacturing firms, domestic manufacturing firms in international market, Ethiopia just started implementing Kaizen philosophy since 2011-12 with the technical assistance of JICA from Japan. So actually, to see the degree of emphasis given by the government to implement Kaizen at national level, it can be better understood by the establishment of Ethiopian Kaizen Institutes in 2011 and the making September as month of Kaizen by Ethiopian Kaizen Institute. So when it comes to research gap, there are certain studies actually related to Kaizen conducted in Ethiopia, but most of the studies are related to challenges, effectiveness, and the degree of implementations, and the employees' attitude towards the implementation of Kaizen. And they are actually restrictive. There is no comprehensive study that is conducted to find out the impact of Kaizen implementation on quality and productivity of manufacturing firms. So having said this one is actually the research framework, which is developed by the researcher. So in this model, we have 5 hypotheses, which is direct association between the Kaizen, MUDA, PDCA or Plan, Do, Check, Act, and productivity. And we have again 2 hypotheses related to the indirect effect of waste elimination implementation and PDCA analysis on productivity of manufacturing firms related to the implementation of Kaizen 5S or housekeeping. So research methods, the research design is actually descriptive and explanatory, and it is again survey types of strategy was implemented. The research approach, it is multi-quantitative because of two methods of data collection related to the primary data. Source of data, both primary and secondary. Methods of data collection is questionnaire. So here you have the summary of sampling design and questionnaire dispatching issues. Target population was actually 13. The first company selected for pilot implementation of Kaizen at national level. This list actually obtained from Ethiopian Kaizen Institute. And all employees are actually part of this survey because Kaizen basically involves every employee to participate for its implementation. Data analysis. So as I've said, here we have 7 hypotheses. The first 5 hypotheses are actually aimed to find out the direct impact of the Kaizen, mood, and PDC analysis on productivity. So it can be measured by, analyzed by structural allocation model. The 2 hypotheses were actually tested by same bootstrapping method to find out the indirect effect of PDC analysis and waste elimination on productivity. So when you see the results of the descriptive statistics, the housekeeping, right, MODA or waste elimination, and the PDC analysis, right? So the first 2 elements of Kaizen or tools of Kaizen, which is housekeeping and the MODA elimination, was actually implemented at moderate level, and the PDC analysis implementation was actually very low. So this is actually some of the features collected during data collection before and after Kaizen photos. This is actually one of the practice for sustaining Kaizen, keeping before and after photos to indicate the progress of the company related to Kaizen 5 house implementations. These pictures are actually obtained from Walia Steel, which is around Sabata. So here is the data analysis. Initially, I developed 45 items, and these items are actually subjected to explanatory factor analysis. Then after this analysis, 4 items are actually discarded from further consideration because of cross-loading and the low factor loading. And all the constructive validity and the validity issues are actually checked by structural allocation model. The structural model fit in this is actually checked to see the data was actually fit for structural allocation analysis. All the assumptions, including multi-valid normality, outlier linearity, multi-connectivity, homogeneity, sample size requirements are actually checked, and assumptions are actually made. So this is the structural equation path model, which shows the direct and indirect effect of the 3 Kaizen implementation tools on productivity. Generally, the 3 items or tools of Kaizen implementation, coefficient of determination, which is R scale of the model, is 48%, which indicating Kaizen 5S, waste or mood elimination, PDC analysis, implementation practice can explain 48% of variance on productivity of manufacturing organizations in Ethiopia. So this is the direct effect analysis. From this analysis, it is actually clear that both the 3 variables have a direct impact on productivity of manufacturing organizations. And again, Kaizen 5 implementation have a direct impact on mood elimination and waste elimination and PDC analysis. When it comes to the indirect effect analysis, the first indirect, okay, let's go to the conclusions. So Kaizen 5S housekeeping is a continuous improvement program that has been perceived as one method for adding productivity in the production system. So the results of the same effect analysis in this study also leads to conclusions that companies' culture of adopting Kaizen, 5S, waste elimination, and PDC analysis or philosophy as continuous improvement program positively and significantly related to productivity improvement among sample companies. However, in addition to the usual step-by-step approach or implementing the Kaizen tools, sometimes it will be better to see joint implementation of Kaizen events, like implementing housekeeping with PDC analysis and the mood elimination. So the indirect effects, which is actually related to the implementation of the mediating role of PDC analysis and the waste elimination, indicated that actually PDC analysis failed to missed the association between the Kaizen implementation and productivity between manufacturing organizations. This actually leads to the conclusions that continuous improvement of manufacturing process through solving problems in scientific way through PDC analysis, which is a error-proofing method. P for plan, do, check analysis or implementation, significantly reduces the relationship between Kaizen 5S and productivity improvement. However, there is no indirect relationship between Kaizen and productivity through housekeeping. Therefore, in addition to implementing Kaizen, 5S implementation methodology as a corporate culture, PDC analysis, which is plan, do, check analysis, plays a significant role on productivity improvement of manufacturing firms. So this is due to the fact that in addition to effectively managing and maintaining and to achieve a clean workplace through Kaizen 5S, it's also important to solve problems related to manufacturing process in scientific way through error-proofing method or PDC analysis approach for better productivity improvement. Thank you. Yeah.
Let's give him thank you, Dr. Abraham, for presenting a statistically rigorous research finding that demonstrates the relationship between Kaizen and productivity. So now it's time for Mr. Nawai Iman to present his research output on the effect of political marketing mixed elements on voters' loyalty. So the case of marketing and prosperity party, I think we all are familiar with Mr. Nawai because he is a journalist in the sport and recreational division in the Ethiopian Broadcasting Service. So let's give him a hand. And so, Mr. Nawai, you will have a maximum of 10 minutes to present your research. I think the zero is here, one second.
marketing. Thank you. It's a great privilege for me to present my paper in front of these academicians from different sectors. So actually it's very difficult for me, but I will try to disseminate some knowledge I've got from my second degree program. As the second speaker from Otavie Metropolitan University said, I'm one of the less experienced researcher in this room, so I hope you will support me. My paper is about political marketing, which is a very new idea, not only in Ethiopia, but also for most African countries and even for European countries. But I thought it is very fundamental concept, especially for developing countries like Ethiopia, which politics is all about for the people. So I will focus. My paper is all two variables, you know, everything. So I'll never get into detail about the variables in the other methodology. So marketing, as you know, is borrowed ideas from economics, management, and different disciplines. But in turn, after especially 1950s, marketing became the source of different knowledges, different disciplines. As Kotler, one of the guru of marketing, said, in marketing there is not only market economic goods and services, but also ideas, organizations, persons, places. So at the coming of this idea by Kotler, marketing becomes a source of different knowledges. Due to that political marketing become one of the contribution of marketing. So in simple definition, political marketing is the application of marketing concepts to politics. As you know, marketing is meeting needs profitably. It means the consumers prefer to use to consume their needs, and the marketers' work is to meet that need profitably. So when we convert this idea to political marketing, political marketing is all about the process by which political candidates and ideas are directed at the voters in order to satisfy their political needs and thus gain their support for the candidate and the ideas in question. So as the definition marketing, the meeting need is profitability. It's also the same political marketing. The political parties and political candidates satisfy their voters by promising different policy ideas and programs. So as Lee Marshman, a well-known political marketing writer, she said political marketing is a fruitful marriage between politics and marketing. So you might ask, political marketing in Ethiopia, whether we know or not, we're practicing political marketing in different ways, as we have seen in our recent election. We see different posters across different places of Addis Ababa in such a way that we call it direct marketing and political marketing. The other is the political narratives we have here and there through different media, and also the social media, especially recently our political leaders highly engaged in social media. That is, we call it social media marketing, and also negative political campaigns are